The job of an archaeologist is an exciting one. You never quite know what you're going to find. Some of your discoveries will be easy to explain. For example, if you find a piece of jewelry, you know that someone once wore it as a decorative item. Not everything you dig up can be explained away so easily, though. And everything you're about to see in this video is still waiting for an official explanation, months or even years after they were first unearthed. A great deal of controversy surrounds the so-called Glozelian tablets. Some people believe they're nothing more than an elaborate fraud, while others say that they point to an unknown civilization who once lived in France thousands of years ago. The story starts in 1924, when farmer Emil Freyden accidentally discovered a vast underground chamber while tending to his land. Inside the chamber were a series of bizarre objects, including masks, statues, and bones that appeared to be human. Accompanying all these artifacts were a series of tablets, upon which were hieroglyphs that defied all attempts at translation. Those who believe the items are genuine say that the artifacts come from the Neolithic era, and the hieroglyphs are a pre-Phoenician language. Freyden's detractors point to the fact that the farmer was arrested for fraud in 1927. And that the police claim to have found evidence that he was making the items inside his farmhouse before burying them in the ground. It's important to note that Freyden was never convicted, and testing on some of the objects has proven that they're at least 2,000 years old. Stonehenge isn't the only important prehistoric henge in England. There are also the Thornboroughhenges. They may not attract as many tourists as Stonehenge, but they're no less significant. Perhaps people don't attach as much glamour to them because they're a feat of earthwork as opposed to stonework. Each henge at Thornborough is a circular bank of earth, surrounded by a central ditch. There are 3 of them in total, all of which have almost identical proportions, 9-foot-high banks with a diameter of 750 feet, surrounding ditches 9 feet deep and 6 feet wide. Originally made around 6,000 years ago, the 3 henges have been placed in perfect alignment with the stars of Orion's belt. Curiously, this is the same arrangement that was used to position the pyramids of Giza. The banks around the henges are covered in locally sourced gypsum, which makes them sparkle when the sun shines. It's an elaborate monument, but we have no idea why it exists. You may notice a similarity between the name of the Gatha Temples and the word gigantic. That's not a coincidence. The temples are the second oldest religious structures in the world after Turkey's Göbekli Tepe, and rank among the oldest freestanding buildings made of stone anywhere in the world, with an estimated age of 5,600 years. You'll find the temples in Malta, where locals like to believe they were built by a race of giants who once ruled the land. The giants built their homes out of boulders and ruled the area for eons, but were eventually driven from the land, and their houses were left to crumble. That's a fanciful tale, but we can see why the locals once believed it. Some of the temples are 20 feet tall, enough for 2 average-sized human beings to fit inside standing on each other's shoulders. Naturally, there's no evidence for the existence of any giants in the Neolithic period, but ruling out the giant origin story doesn't get us any closer to knowing what they were really built for. Having a large sword would have been useful to an ancient warrior, but there comes the point when a sword is too big to have practical value. If your weapon is too heavy to carry, you won't be able to swing it quickly enough to be effective in battle. With that in mind, who would have been capable of wielding the Norimitsu Odachi in anger? This giant sword is Japanese in origin and samurai in style, but at 15 feet long, it's hard to see how one person could have carried it alone, let alone used it. Just like the Gatha Temples, the existence of the sword has prompted rumors that a giant warrior race once existed in Japan, and that this sword is the only evidence of their existence they left behind. There's another theory, of course. The sword could simply be a symbolic gift presented to a mighty warrior in recognition of their achievements during wartime. But where's the fun in believing that? Give us giant samurai warriors over dull explanations every time. There's something a little strange about all the statues on Nuku Hiva in the French Polynesian Islands. They represent humanoid figures, and yet they don't quite look human. Many of the people who have visited the site of Te Mea Tahua on the island or looked at pictures like these feel like the heads of the figures look reptilian, and believe that they might represent visitors from another world. We know, or at least we think we know, that the first humans arrived on Nuku Hiva approximately 2,000 years ago, and that they probably landed there from Samoa. The sculptures were likely made at around the same time, and yet they don't bear any similarity to any known Samoan style of the era. They do, however, look a lot like statues and carvings from the same era that have been found in what was once ancient Sumeria. Either worship of reptile-headed gods was common across the world in ancient times, or the people of those times had seen something to base their statues on. Only someone with a very strong Christian faith could have built the Lalibela Churches in Ethiopia, but even that faith might not have been enough to get the job done. Creating these beautiful buildings out of rock during the 12th century would have been an almost supernatural achievement. Every single one of the 11 churches was hewn out of one solid granite block. Ask a modern construction firm to undertake a task like this, and they'd tell you that they would require thousands of staff and several years to get the job done. But the folklore of the area says that an angel came to help the workers complete every single church in the space of just a single night. The work is so precise that light filters in through holes in the roof of each church, but water is drained away before it can reach the holes. Each church is connected by intricately arranged tunnels with many hidden doors and passageways. The tools available to laborers of the 12th century shouldn't have been capable of work like this, and yet here the churches are. Exploring the Amazonian rainforest can be notoriously difficult because of the density of the vegetation there. Perhaps that's why it took us until 2005 to locate the Amazonian equivalent of Stonehenge in Brazil. Known as Parque Arqueológico do Solstício, which translates as Solstice Archaeological Park, the site contains a stone circle that bears a striking similarity to the more famous one that can be found in Wiltshire, England. There are 127 blocks of carefully arranged granite on the site, some of which stand 12 feet tall, forming a circle that's 100 feet in diameter. As we've never completely understood the purpose of Stonehenge, it may not surprise you to hear that we don't completely understand the purpose of this site either. It could have been used for ceremonial, burial, or astronomical purposes, a combination of all three, or none of them at all. People who are local to the area were surprised by all the fuss after it was officially found. They've known about it for generations and have always called it Tropical Stonehenge. It's not quite as old as the original, though. Pottery fragments at the site suggest an age of somewhere between 500 and 2000. Afghanistan is a devoutly Muslim country now, and has been for centuries, but way back in its distant history, it was a Buddhist land, and it has the historical monuments to prove it. It used to have the Bamiyan Buddhas, but they were destroyed by fundamentalists in 2001. Now, the oldest and most celebrated reminder of those Buddhist times is the Stupa of Takht-i-Rostam. The site is something that the builders of Ethiopia's Lalibela Churches would have approved of. It's been carved directly into the rock. It's also very well fortified. The stupa is surrounded on all sides by a trench 25 feet deep, so nobody would have been able to gain access to it uninvited. Relics of the Buddha were once held inside the Harmika building at the top of the monument, while the caves towards the bottom acted as monastic cells, which would have been dark other than the slivers of light that would have penetrated the holes in the roof. The world's oldest geoglyph has been a puzzling sight for scientists ever since it was discovered in Russia in 2011. Now the mystery has deepened a little further, because it would appear that the adult humans who drew it had a little help from their children. The geoglyph is a roughly drawn outline of an animal, presumed to be an elk, and can be found close to Lake Zurakutul in Russia's Ural Mountains. Preliminary scientific testing has suggested that it was etched into the earth approximately 6,000 years ago. At more than 900 feet long, it would have been quite a task to draw it, especially considering the finished artwork can only truly be appreciated from above. Stone tools found near the site range in size from 7 inches to barely over half an inch, so it's highly likely the smaller tools were used by young children. That might explain why the quality of the drawing isn't spectacular. We still don't know which race or tribe these adults and children belonged to, nor why they chose to mark their territory with a huge elk. The Liber Lentius is several mysteries wrapped in one. It's the oldest known surviving example of the ancient Etruscan language. It's defied any attempt to translate it, and it was found wrapped around a 2,250-year-old Egyptian mummy. To further complicate the issue, the mummy is the corpse of an Egyptian noblewoman who had no known connections to the Etruscans, or the area of ancient Italy in general. The mummy had been in a private collection until 1859, until the original owner died, and it was donated to a Croatian museum. It wasn't until 1891 that the writing on the mummy's wrappings began to attract attention, and Egyptologists realized it wasn't hieroglyphics, Coptic, or Libyan. As we've never been able to translate the ancient Etruscan language, we have no idea what the message says. We also don't know why a seemingly normal rich Egyptian woman would be mummified inside strips of linen covered in writings that had seemingly nothing to do with her. Perhaps the people who buried her simply didn't have any other cloth available at the time. Cerro Sechin, which is part of the Sechin Bajo archaeological site in Peru, is something of a blank slate as far as archaeologists are concerned. We have no idea who built it, and we have no idea why they built it. We do know something about them, though, and it's a little bit disturbing. We know they like to carve multiple illustrations of badly mutilated human bodies into the rock. Testing at the site has shown that it was founded approximately 4,000 years ago and remained in use for about 500 years, during which time it likely served as a center for administration and ceremony. But that's just the best guess. We have no idea what kind of ceremony would have called for these gruesome carvings. There are more than 400 of them circling the site, seeming to depict warriors skewering their enemies in various styles of visceral butchery, leaving very little to the imagination. Maybe the people who lived here just wanted us to know they had a strong understanding of human anatomy. It's been said that if you visit the statue of the Lady of Elche in Madrid, Spain, and stare at it for too long, you'll lose your mind. The eyes of the sculpture seem to bore a hole straight through you. Many people have noted the unsettling effect of the lady's gaze since she was discovered in Valencia in 1897, and perhaps that feeling of unease is why nobody's been motivated to find out more about her. Theories as to her identity have ranged from a witch to a tribal queen, but it's most likely that she's an Iberian interpretation of Tanit, the mother goddess of Carthage, and she was used as a funeral urn. She's in such good condition that many people have claimed in the past that the statue is a forgery, but tests carried out in 2011 revealed the presence of ash containing fragmented human bones within the urn, and carbon dated those remains to 2,500 years ago. She's definitely a genuine artifact, but who she represents and how she came to suddenly appear in Valencia after 2,400 years in such great condition is a riddle without an answer. Subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications, and you will be the first to know when a new video comes out. Thank you for watching, and see you soon.